So we finally got our centre back. Welcome back to another video. Manchester City have completed the signing of Rúben Dias from Benfica, and today we're going to take a closer look at this new potential centre back solution to the ongoing saga that lasted all summer. That was painful to watch. We finally went around the houses and got there. We literally went around the houses big time, but we did finally end up at a bus stop, and that bus stop was Rúben Dias. Does that metaphor work? Who knows? Who even cares? But anyway, I want to say thank you to OneFootball for sponsoring this video as well. The wonderful people over at OneFootball have been supporting my channel for absolutely ages now. I'm just proud of that because they're a genuinely fantastic app with all the information you need to know about Manchester City and all the information, the stats and the transfer news and all that kind of stuff. So go and download it in the link in the description below. It means absolutely loads to me. It helps support the channel and you won't regret it. It's free. It's fantastic. What's not to love? So we finally got a centre back, pretty much one that no one saw coming, if we're being honest. Let's go on to the overview bit of this video. We've got loads to talk about. We've got his sphere, we've got his style of play, we've got his stats, his injury record and loads more to talk about. We're going to talk about the background to this because you can't really mention the signing without the horrible, tiring background that was this transfer window in general. We've got the man. But as I said, we did go around the houses a little bit. First of all, it was Kalidou Koulibaly. Then it was Diego Carlos. Then it was Jimenez. Then it was Koundé. And finally, we just basically went through the list of targets on my 8 alternatives to Koulibaly video that I made. And finally, it was Rúben Dias. And I must admit, understandably, a lot of people felt a little bit underwhelmed, given that we'd all got so invested in Koulibaly. And then we'd all got so invested in Koundé as well. And then that didn't happen. But honestly, I've come around to this. I have genuinely come around to this. And I'm starting to feel a little bit positive in general about this guy. And of course I am, because he is actually a good player. He may not be the one that you want, but he is actually a good player. And he's only young too. He's only 23 years old, just recently turned 23 in May. So he's only very young in terms of a centre-back. And I think there's a lot to like here. Genuinely an awful lot to like. I mean, City have genuinely been scouting him for an awful long time. I remember mentioning videos well over a year ago because it was always that City were linked to him. And he has been one of the hottest young defenders in European football, and lots of big clubs have been linked to him. So City are genuinely paying attention to him. There's absolutely no doubt that at one point we were in for him. Apparently, according to reports, we were demanded 100 million euros from last summer, which was his release clause, and City were like, no. And now, of course, it's a little bit different, and we have got our man. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting, but I'm quite excited. In terms of the fee, well, I mean, obviously, Otamendi has gone the other way, which is a bit of a sweetener for Benfica, so it does change things a little bit there. And reportedly, depends who you believe, it's been around 55 million euros, around 50 to 60 million euros with Otamendi going the other way. And given the fact that we wouldn't go around the 75 million euros, apparently, that they wanted to pay, that Sevilla and Napoli wanted us to pay for Koulibaly or Koundé, and City wanted something a little bit cheaper. And of course, you've got to bear in mind as well, we are in a kind of COVID world at the moment. It is very hard to sign players. And also budget for it. City have lost money as well. I know we're cash rich and we've got loads of money, but we have lost money from this in terms of just match day revenue and all that kind of stuff. And lots of clubs in generally are a little bit skint at the moment. So they're trying to hold on to some of their assets. I know that sounds kind of like the exact opposite you'd expect, but some are trying to hold on to them because they can't really then fund a replacement potentially. And some are trying to basically also get as much money as they can out of them because they are a bit skint. So even though it may sometimes play in our favour, like the Ferran Torres deal, you've got someone like Napoli trying to get a big payday because they want the money, understandably. But this fee seems just about reasonable and fair enough given everything at the moment. And I think it's a pretty decent fee for a very talented young centre-back with loads of potential. In terms of the style of play, he's aggressive. He's genuinely aggressive. I remember watching him for the UEFA Nations League, and I've done all the research, of course, online. But the first time I saw him was when he was playing for Portugal in the UEFA Nations League. And he was very impressive for Portugal around that team. He's very aggressive, genuinely aggressive. He's he's a powerhouse, basically. And I do miss that. I do miss someone a bit Kompany-esque in terms of a little bit of nastiness in terms of their approach to the game. People willing to bully a defender. Otamendi is aggressive, of course, but he was never really the biggest player, Otamendi, so he did struggle sometimes just to nudge people off the ball a little bit, whereas Dias is a lot taller than Otamendi. He's 6'2", pushing 6'3", and he's built like the proverbial brick wall. He's absolutely massive, and he can bully and push people around, and that is what that's what he does, basically. He really is not afraid to use his physicality, and I love that. I do love an aggressive defender, and I do love someone who's willing to take control as well. One of the reasons that apparently we're in for Koulibaly is because he had a little bit of leadership about him, and this guy genuinely is a leader. He's 100% a leader. There's been clips going around of him being really like kind of motivating in the dressing room, leading the team, kind of like the team little meetings and all that kind of stuff, leading the huddles. And he's literally called the boss. That's what the old nickname is, because he's known for his leadership tendencies. And I do love that. I do love a physical, proper leader. Now, of course, and that's not to say he's absolutely perfect and all that kind of stuff. He isn't slow, by the way. I've seen this going around, like people saying, oh, he's a really slow player. I wouldn't say he's lightning quick, but I definitely wouldn't say he's slow either. I was very surprised when people were saying that, because I remember thinking, I don't remember him being that slow, actually. I don't remember him being like Otamendi kind of level pace. So I did a little bit of research once again and checked. I was like, no, he's not. He's actually, I wouldn't say he's fast, but then I wouldn't say Laporte's fast either. But I wouldn't say Laporte's slow. So it reminds me more of Laporte in that turn of pace. And he's also one of those players, like, Kompany wasn't lightning quick towards the end of his reign at Manchester City either. But you couldn't really get past Vincent Kompany because he was so physical that he would basically harry you so well that it was very hard to dribble past. And that's what I see a very similar thing in terms of Rúben Dias. Not the fastest, but his sheer physical presence more than makes up for not being the world's fastest player. And I wouldn't say he's slow either. He's not Otamendi. He turns definitely quicker than that from what I can tell. A little bit like Rodri, I'd say, in terms of pace. I wouldn't say Rodri is slow either. A bit like Rodri as well in terms of his physicality and his sides, which I really like. One thing as well I really like about him, he's a very good passer, like a genuinely very good passer. He pings passes really, really well, and I'll get onto that a little bit more detail in a minute when I go through his stats as well. But he's just a natural passer, very composed on the ball. Really will suit our style that way. He's very good at diagonals as well, and he's even got a couple of assists from those passes as well. I think he's going to fit into the team in that sense in a very, very, very good way. Also, he's right-footed, by the way, and plays right centre-back, which is obviously very, very useful given that we've got two left-footers now, and then obviously we've got Stones there as well. So we've got a lot of height basically back in our back line as well, which is really, really good. In terms of weaknesses, he can be known to switch off every now and then, which is not great, of course, but it is also worth saying, I did speak to a couple of Benfica fans, and one did say you've got to bear in mind that he's absolutely miles above his teammates. He's surrounded by players that aren't anywhere near. Apparently, Andre Almeida is absolutely crap, and Ferran is absolutely crap, and even the defensive midfielder ahead of them isn't very good. He even said, this Benfica fan I did speak to said the right back is basically a meme, and largely the level of defending in Portugal isn't that good, and he's kind of on his own doing things. And that's obviously not great that largely he does make mistakes every now and can switch off. But the counter of that is when I saw him for Portugal, he was absolutely rock solid and focused. And some people do actually need to play around a higher standard of players to actually bring out their best ability. I'm not saying this is definitely the case, but it is also worth considering that sometimes you can plateau a little bit at the level you're at. If you're already the best defender in your league, you've got no real motivation either to kind of improve, if that makes sense. Because if you're already the best, and occasionally it doesn't really matter what you do and all that kind of stuff, you're not going to challenge yourself or learn from a better coach or learn from better centre-backs or better players around you. You'll never improve, basically. And I do once again remember a young Vincent Kompany coming to Manchester City, and he wasn't perfect either, and he did make some mistakes every now and then. Now, I'm not saying he is that level, but what I'm saying is Vincent Kompany wasn't the same player initially as he was what he became. So it is worth bearing that in mind. It can happen. You can plateau at your level. I mean, fingers crossed, we see what we see when he plays for Portugal, when he's surrounded by better players, a better system, and all that kind of stuff. Surrounded by the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo, a serial winner, genuinely very focused. Of course, our own Bernardo Silva, United's Bruno Fernandes. Players are actually winners at a high level and genuinely very intense too. That obviously improves his game. And I was really impressed when I saw him in the Nations League. So I was surprised why everyone was on such a downer by him. So maybe there are some weaknesses there. But it's also worth noting that he's got an awful lot of positives about his game as well. And I'm going to kind of hold on to that. In terms of his injury record, by the way, which is something we always have to bring up when we're talking about Manchester City transfer targets, it's basically immaculate. I mean, look, first of all, look at these stats, by the way, how many games he's played. So, since he broke into the team, and his first full season was in the 18-19 season, basically for Benfica, he played 32 out of 34 league games and 55 games in total for Benfica that season. Then he played 33 out of 34 league games last season and 49. And you've got to bear in mind as well, he played 7 and 10 games extra in those years for Portugal as well. So that's an awful lot of football that he plays, and he basically misses absolutely none of it. This is his injury record. An ankle injury in 17-18, which is not even when he was fully in the first team yet, which apparently missed him 0 games anyway. And then he had his appendix out once. You know, I think they'll allow him that, actually. That's why he missed some games in the 17-18 season, because he had his appendix out. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much understandable, you know. I wouldn't really say that's injury prone. Basically, this guy just plays an awful lot of football and doesn't miss games. It's music to my ears. Please, please uphold that record at Manchester City, Ruben. It'd be absolutely wonderful. In terms of his actual stats, what I've decided to do here is compare him statistically with a whole bunch of stats against Jules Koundé, which makes an awful lot of sense, Kalidou Koulibaly, and Aymeric Laporte. Just as a little kind of disclaimer, I've used Laporte's season from the 18-19 season because last season he barely played any games. So what basically a broadest spectrum of their most fullest recent seasons, if that makes sense. So I've got here the stats up. Immediately you can see, by the way, I mean, you've got like games played and all that kind of stuff. It's roughly similar. Koulibaly played a little bit less last season, but he did pick up an injury or so last season, and maybe that is indicative of his age anyway, which is worth noting. So that is something to consider. And of course, you've got things like his passes attempted. He actually attempted the second most passes out of the team. Laporte was miles ahead, of course, given our possession, but Rúben Dias was miles ahead in terms of passes attempted over Koundé and Koulibaly. He does pass an awful lot. Pass accuracy as well was pretty good. Second of the list, the third on the list, if I'm being honest. Koulibaly was just behind Laporte, but his pass accuracy is better than Jules Koundé, 88% to 85%. And I've got no doubt, by the way, in Manchester City side, with Guardiola being the pass master, that will be over 90% pretty easily. This is the stat I really like, by the way. He attempted 307 long passes, which is absolutely lows. Laporte, 268, despite Laporte playing more games, so notably more. Not even far off double what Koundé and Koulibaly attempted, and most impressively, basically a 60% long pass accuracy completion rate is phenomenal for how many he absolutely attempted, which is crazy. Now, of course, Koulibaly did a pretty high one as well, 67, but it's worth bearing in mind that he attempted nearly like half as many long passes. Basically, he's very good at long passes, much better than Koundé on that thing. This is the next stat that shows just what kind of player he is. In terms of the duels contested, 254, the most out of any of those defenders. He's very, very aggressive, and he made 44 tackles as well, which is only second to Koulibaly and about similar to Laporte, and nearly double basically of what Jules Koundé did. So he's a lot better in terms of attempting tackles and winning tackles in terms of the stats there. Aerial duels, basically. I must admit, fair play to Jules Koundé. He's actually the best in the air compared to this list. 149 contested. Only second, though, was Rúben Dias, 141, which was much more than Koulibaly and a little bit more than Laporte. Rúben Dias and Koundé are very similar in terms of the aerial duels contested, but he's actually second in the list once again. Koundé was 63%, fair play to him, but he's around 61% Rúben Dias, which is better by somewhere than Koulibaly, and 56 and 57 for Laporte. That's pretty decent. His ground duels contested, once again, a solid number in second, 130 for Koulibaly, which is very much part of his game, and then 113 there for Rúben Dias in second, which is a lot more than Koundé and a little bit more than Laporte. In terms of his actual ground duel success rate, he's pretty good at this. Once again, Koundé's really good, 63%, but then you've got nearly 63 for Laporte, nearly 62 for Dias, so there's barely anything to split them there. All three of those, by the way, are a few percent better than Koulibaly, which is quite interesting. And then the clearances, by the way, he's out in front of that, which is really impressive. Quite a lot of clearances there, about nearly double Koulibaly, which is quite interesting. And then interceptions, he's pretty good at that once again. It was Laporte, then Koulibaly, then Dias, with only one behind Koulibaly, and Koundé down in fourth with 23. And then the most blocks as well, 17 to Koulibaly's 16, to Koundé's 12, and Laporte's 9. So as you can see, basically, he's obviously very good at passing, he's obviously very aggressive and assertive, and he's more than good enough in the air. Basically, he just as much matches all those players, if not exceeds them in some of the stats, which is really, really impressive for me. We've got a very well-rounded player there, which I'm very happy about. And I don't see any reason why to doubt that as well. By the way, a couple of assists, which is interesting as well. Laporte with 3 assists, Rúben Dias with 2, and Koundé with 1, Koulibaly with absolutely 0. So in terms of the squad status, what are we expecting from Rúben Dias? Well, we see do like to rotate the centre-backs, of course, but I've got a feeling this guy's going to come in and be our number one right-sided centre-back alongside Laporte or alongside Ake. I mean, City do rotate a lot more than most teams do. Guardiola isn't one just to really choose a settled centre-back pairing. I mean, I would like that, but largely he is fine with rotating defenders. What I do know in general, by the way, is that this back four of Dias, Stones, hopefully Stones is the Stones he played against Wolves, so a lot more focused. Dias, Stones, and Ake Laporte is exponentially stronger than last season's, which was an injured Laporte, so barely involved for most of the season. Garcia, who does have physical problems, unfortunately. He's only small, a raw 19-year-old, not really anywhere near physically capable compared to Dias and Ake, who've come in Otamendi, who was old. Otamendi turned like milk and absolutely error-prone. Stones last season was mainly injured and also very unfocused at times. And then an old midfielder played at centre-back in Fernandinho. I mean, this is much, much better and much more balanced. And I suspect we'll see an awful lot of Dias because, one, he doesn't get injured. Two, he has an awful lot of potential. And three, he fits the motif that Manchester City want to play. Now, of course, he isn't the fastest and all that kind of stuff. But if we play with that same intensity and focus, we could have two very big, powerful centre-backs in Laporte and Dias alongside each other, which could be a fantastic, fantastic partnership. I'm hoping, basically, for an aggressive version and more of a leader version of John Stones, which is more we can hope for. And once again, he's only 23 years old. And guys, do you know what? I was a little bit underwhelmed initially, but I can't not pretend that I'm excited by this guy now. I did want him a year ago. I genuinely did. And I feel like, of course, we've all got dragged into the world of Koundé and Koulibaly, but Dias is a very good player. He's genuinely a very good player. So we have to be... genuinely have to be positive about this because we've got to support him and all that kind of stuff. And in this market, I think he'll be fine. There's nothing wrong with having a plan B or C or whatever. City had a list of players they wanted to sign, which is totally fair enough. Didn't get one or two of them, so they went for another. I think, what's wrong with that? Guys, we've got Rúben Dias. What do you make of it? Please let me know down in the comments. I'm sure you're already starting to type, Stephen, this is a waste of money. Or, Stephen, I'm really excited by this. What I will say is don't go off FIFA. Please don't go off FIFA. Don't judge your opinions based off that or a football manager or whatever. Talk to some Benfica fans, you know. Benfica fans do love him. I'll talk to some who watch the Portuguese national team and all that kind of stuff. Don't just go off preconceived notions that you've got. Bear in mind, he's going to be playing around better players, so I've got no doubt that he will improve given time. He'll be trained better, he'll be coached better, he'll be surrounded by absolute winners, which he hasn't really been at Benfica, to the level of Aguero and Kevin De Bruyne. And last time we signed a player from Benfica, it did all right, was it, in Ederson? Fingers crossed he can follow in those same footsteps, because our record for Portugal hasn't been great, but this guy could hopefully be different. Thank you once again to all the patrons who've been scrolling down the side of the screen. These guys are my absolute heroes who keep this channel going. I really, really appreciate all your support, and also for the YouTube members. I will be going live, of course, as well. By the time you finish watching this, I'll be going live. So definitely come and join me to chat about the game. Thank you for the members. Thank you for all the Patreon support. And thank you for everyone for giving this video a like and getting down in the comments and hitting that subscribe button. We've got our centre-back. That's probably our transfer window done now. But I'm happy. I'm relieved. And I'll take it. He's a good player. Give the boys some support. And if not, he'll probably bully you into it anyway because he's a physical bastard. And I like that. In a bit. Love you all.